Life is complex.
So is our mental health. It cannot be understood by diagnosis alone.
Our philosophy is treat the person, not the mental illness.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Humanizing Mental Health. I'm Jeremy Alcorn.
And I'm Trent Akers.
We are doing a specific and special podcast that is a little different than what we've done in the last little bit. We've typically had guest speakers on each episode and something that was focusing on them. It's just that right now is Pride Month for disabilities.
Woo!
So today we're going to get an inside look into Trent's experience. Now, we recognize that doesn't somehow represent everybody's experience, but at the same time, it's through our stories that we begin to build understanding between each other. So this is where we're going today.
Yeah. It's been a while since it's just been you and I.
Yeah. Actually, there's been a lot of interest recently from a variety of people that have wanted to guest on our show, which has been wonderful. Our audience has grown. We're hoping that message is getting out more to humanize our life experience. So, Trent, I'm thinking here, where do we want to start?
Okay, well, what I'm wondering, Jeremy, is first of all, let's maybe back it up here, dude, because we have talked a little bit about my life story, but I'm curious, what I wonder for you. I'm gonna ask you a question, and I'm wondering if you can guess what are the most frequently asked questions that you think I get.
Wow. You know what? Because myself, I'm a reasonably cautious person. Like, how often have I really asked you questions about life that you experience with disability? So I find it actually kind of rude and intrusive to do so. So I'm just gauging my response here a little bit as to,
Eh,
as to that. So because the thing is, there may be some people that ask some really wild and bold questions,
mhm.
but I imagine there's lots of questions about how do you do things.
Well, yeah, okay, yeah, a lot of it, okay, so okay, if this was David Letterman and we were doing the top 5 questions you could ask. So number 1 is what happened to you? Number
Oh,
2 is how fast does that chair go? Number 3, yeah, and it's like how long do those batteries last? Number 4 would be a lot from kids is like, do you sleep in your wheelchair? And number 5 is like, what do you do all day?
mhm.
Yeah. So,
Let's start answering them.
all right. Well, okay. Yeah. So what happened to me? Well, maybe to those of you that haven't listened to the humans behind the mic in a while, I have a disability known as cerebral palsy. I was born about 28 weeks premature, and because of that, I had underdeveloped lungs and I had what's called a hypoxic event, which basically means that you're starved of oxygen, and because of that, the key areas of the brain that are responsible for motor control and smoothness actually died off. Now, basically, it's very akin to a stroke. So, as I explain it to children, I'm kind of like a puppet with various strings. Some strings are tight, some strings are loose, and some strings are average. So, for me, it's affected my whole body. Whereas for a lot of people with cerebral palsy, it's kind of a blanket condition. So it can be your whole body or be a quadriplegic like I am, or you can have one limb, or you can have two. It really depends. And then depending upon the level of brain damage that you get, a lot of people can have basically co-occurring disabilities. So that would be very common to have like an intellectual disability or other things of that nature, and having issues with speech, breathing, things like that. I'm very lucky where my mother actually used to say, my brain is the strongest muscle in my body. Does that answer
Mm,
your question?
yes, it certainly does answer the question.
Yeah.
And and I think then one of the things that happens is people make assumptions
Hmm.
when they see you. They may make assumptions about a level of function or whatever that might be.
Oh yeah, very much so. I mean, very frequently, like if I have a caregiver with me, which very often now I do because my caregiver is my driver. Many people will just refer to them, when speaking to me, like, asking questions. For example, it's quite frequent whenever I go to a restaurant that people will, what are they having? And it's like, well, actually I can, choose for myself. This happens quite frequently at Subway, but now I've actually learned to just elevate my chair. So in some cases, depending upon who I'm with, I'm literally towering over my caregiver and literally sitting above them. So, it could be helpful with that.
I imagine that would make a difference when you're like lifted up eye to eye, that all of a sudden it changes the dynamic. Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah. And, yeah, I don't know. I'm curious for you because I don't think we've ever talked about this on air. What was it like for you when you saw me elevate for the first time?
Yeah, I was like shocked. I was like, oh, I was like, dude, you could actually reach stuff off the top of your fridge. I was like, you gotta be careful, man. Don't go faster. You're gonna fall over.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, first of all, okay, I just want to put our viewers or our listeners at ease. My chair does not go super fast when it's elevated because it takes me from about like maybe a height of like 2 foot or 3 foot while sitting up to about how tall are you? Because you and I are almost like,
I'm 5'8",
yeah,
but you're well above my head when you elevate all the way up. You
yeah,
got to be
yeah.
about
So
6 foot.
yeah, yeah. So I'm about 6 foot, and I think that really speaks to, issues with disability is that a lot of times, like where you say get things off the top of your fridge. I think that's something, as speaking as a person with a physical disability, that a lot of people who are ambulatory really don't think about. It's not always about, you know, the big things, which are important, of course, like curb cuts and automatic doors. Side note, actually, curb cuts came around because of World War II, because of all the veterans. But it's really about like, the small things, the little things that people take advantage of, like getting things off the top of your fridge, getting things out of your freezer, getting cups out of cupboards. Because even though we have a more accessible world, what it is that it's still predominantly viewed through an able-bodied lens.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
for sure.
yeah.
Yeah. So what about the second question? Dose.
Okay. How fast does it go? Well, actually, believe it or not, most electric wheelchairs are actually made with a speed limit. So most electric wheelchairs can only go about 15 kilometers an hour. Mine goes 12. And right now, I've had this chair for about 5 years, and I've gone over 2,019 kilometers in it.
Wow. Yeah. Yeah. Well, and by the way, I've been with Trent. We've been out going to get ice cream or whatever, and he slows it down. When he's going on his own, it's like woof, zipping down. Like I would be a fast jog to keep up.
Come on. Come on. Is it that hard with two legs to keep up with me? Okay. Number four. How long do
No,
those
no, no.
batteries
We're on
last?
three. We're on three.
Three. Okay. Okay. Listen, I'm good with emotional math. I'm not good with actual math.
But we're just counting.
Wow. Rude.
Okay. All right.
Jerk.
Bring it. Okay, bring it. Number three.
All right. Number three. How long do those batteries last? It really depends on really how far I go. So, I mean, now, like, I plug my chair in every night, and so I really don't know. But like, let's say if I go on like a maybe a 3 or 5 kilometer walk, which I usually do here in the summer, it'll get down to about maybe half battery power. So, well, I haven't really tested the limits. I would imagine it would be about maybe 6 or 8 kilometers, which if you honestly think about it, ain't bad. I mean, before when I was a kid, it would maybe last like, 1 kilometer, maybe two. So it's gone up in almost, 30 years of me driving a chair.
Yeah, yeah, totally. Totally. You were driving way before any of your peers were driving, that's for sure.
Yeah, you're not wrong. All right, number 4, actual 4.
Actually, number 4.
I forget what did I say number 4 was?
Dude, I don't remember. We could rewind and look, but you said there was
Yeah.
5 things. So what did we cover already? We
Oh yeah,
covered like,
yeah.
oh yeah.
I think the one was about our. Wait, you want to summarize? You can summarize.
No, it's fine. It's fine. You remember. That's all I was trying to do.
Yeah. Like kids asking me if I sleep in my chair at night, and like
Oh yeah.
honestly, no, it is
Yeah.
very uncomfortable.
Yeah.
It's almost like sleeping in a back brace because what I like my seating system is custom made and that like well it holds me and it's comfortable. It's not something you can really relax in or really get comfortable in because you it you can't really move and it's not really made for comfort. So of course like what I have is I have a trapeze on a track that I literally swing across to my bed at night, and then I
Mm.
swing back into my chair.
Right. This is interesting. I've been there. I've seen the trapeze. I've used it to stretch my back with. So imagine this. So think of Trent swinging on a trapeze, and it's basically exactly what you're thinking. The only thing
Yeah.
is, of course, you need assistance in part of the process, not to lift yourself, not to swing, but just in moving across on the track.
Yeah, so I have my caregivers hold basically my lower legs up, and they just kind of help push me over like a sack of old potatoes. But that's well, and Jeremy's very right that I have to lift myself. So first thing, whenever I get up in the morning, I have to be very awake because first of all, my caregivers are getting me dressed, and then I have to do a chin up first thing in the morning. And so, I mean, it's not only about like you can't really wake up, be half awake, and stumble out of bed, and grab your favorite beverage to drink. You have to be awake because you have to be your hands have to be secure, and you have to be willing to pull all your weight up, which is also why I try to stay in decent shape.
Right. Like, I'm not sure that there's too many people that can do as many pull-ups as Trent.
I don't know. I mean, the world record for chin-ups, which the last time I checked was held by an Australian female cop, and I think that she did something like 300 and a little bit
But
over.
I said I don't know anybody. I don't know that person. Of the
Fair.
people that I know, I think you do the most number of of pull-ups.
Well, fair enough. But I mean that's part of my life and part of my job is to really keep my body running because with cerebral palsy, right? That I mean my condition is the way that it is. It won't decompensate any further as long as I keep myself physically active. So if I do my physio, go to the gym, I mean I'll age, but I'm not going to get any worse. Hopefully.
Right. It's
Hope
not a
yeah.
degenerative disease. It's just like the rest of us, these meat sacks get old and they wear out over time.
Yeah. Yeah.
In
Speaking of
fact, we call
which,
them meat sacks, but they're probably more saline sacks. They're mostly we just the sack to hold salt water in. But
yeah. And it's interesting that we're sitting here and we're talking about my 5 most common questions because, and even that we're doing Disability Pride Month, because in a lot of ways, for a lot of people, I mean, even for my family members, my primary status has always been my disability.
yes, in fact, let's come back to that because that's going to be really important. But we don't want to miss 5. I don't
Okay.
even remember what 5 is. Do you remember what 5 is? I don't remember.
No, no. Okay. So we'll do the top 4. How does that sound?
Okay, we'll leave it at 4. We mentioned something earlier, that was 5, and it's hard for me to let go of that, Trent. But I'm gonna internally, okay, we're gonna leave it at 4. And you were just talking about primary status with family, and this is, I think, pretty essential. One of the most significant things I think that we talked about off camera was the idea of having a child with a disability and what is that like, especially the immediacy of it for a parent.
Yeah.
And I think this is really important.
Yeah, and then maybe I was bearing the lead here a little bit. Yeah, so for those of you that I don't know, I don't know. Have I talked about this publicly yet? I don't think so.
No, you
But
haven't.
no. So for about the last 2 years, my mother was well, she was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, and then which has like I believe it's a 75% death rate. She ended up beating that, and then in the surgery, she ended up actually developing whenever they take out the tumors, they end like sometimes what can happen is when you get cancer, it can be like almost like fanning the flames of a fire by actually doing the surgery because sometimes it can allow cells to migrate. And she went from having pancreatic cancer to where she actually eventually passed away from cancerous tumors in her lungs on November 30th of this year. And it's significant. The reason why I'm bringing up my disability is because frequently over the course of my mother's life, she would frequently tell the story of my birth and about the fact how I was, a little fighter and like how that formed who I was. And, while I appreciated that in her final letters to all of us, that is what she, like that was one of the things that she predominantly spoke about. And for me, while I appreciate the letter and this is something that I processed, it really spoke to me about the fact that when we talk about how disability affects the individual, we don't really think about the trauma that impacts on the parent. And like when a child develops that, and specifically my mother, where for me, I really feel like her final message to me, while I feel she was trying to inspire me, was also, about her still going back to that memory and really struggling to process that and to rectify that with who I am as a person today.
That's
Does that
deep.
make sense?
It does. Like, in fact, I am now going to do a reflection, for sure, in terms of being able to have a sense of even if I'm really understanding. Like, there's a couple levels to this. Like one of the levels is the bereavement process. As you experience the bereavement process, and as you went through a death doula and had your mom had plans for things along the way, and these letters that you would get after her passing. And so there's a lot of weight to that, right? In terms of the reconciliation moment at the end of life, reconciling what life is and what it has been experienced. So what I'm hearing, and I want to make sure that I say this purposefully, is for you, the message from your mom also spoke to maybe a way in which there was a consistent filter or a consistent theme that tied all of your life together, and that was disability. And that really wasn't the way in which you would want to be defined.
No, no. And, I like for me, well, I'm a proud person with a disability. I hold multiple identities, and my disability isn't the only one that's there. Like and while that does form a basis, as you and I know from transactional or sorry, intersectionality, I was going to say transactional analysis, that it's those multiple identities that really make up who we are and how we see the world. And for me, when I like, and I mean, I know I feel in my core like my mother was trying to inspire me and be like, you've been through hard times, you were born in challenge, but it was like, and this is something that I've struggled with, where it's about as a child of that has gone through that, it's difficult because it's like I want to be seen as something more than that, and I would have appreciated, and I mean I want to broach this in saying that I'm not ungrateful, but I would have appreciated if she wanted to inspire me on, to have hope or to carry on, that it wouldn't have been couched within that. Does that make sense?
Yes, yes, for sure. So, and like I said, this to me looks multi-layered because the individual through which this message is coming then is they get the last word with the letter. There's no response, right? There's no capacity for you to debrief the letter after they're gone because the letter
Hmm.
comes after their passing. And there's power in that, but it also, leaves things, I think, in a way that maybe it even lands in a way they didn't intend it to land, you know? Like I
Yeah.
think that you probably even learned some things about your mom in that letter. And maybe even in some ways like shifted something inside you about your mom. I don't know. I look at your face and I go, maybe that reflection didn't land.
No, well, yes and no. Like I know, like my mother, without, even though she's departed, I want to respect her privacy. My mother, dealt with a lot of trauma over her life, and I don't know if she really processed all of this, but on some level, like, I don't know. I think I told you about the book, Post-Traumatic Parenting. Am I
Yeah.
wrong? Yeah.
Yeah.
And and I mean, really going through that book, I can't remember the author's name. Well, I'll make sure to put it down in the show notes for people that are interested, where they talk about where specifically, this is part of where I almost wanted to dive into this on air because I actually wanted to talk about this with you because I thought that this would be interesting. Is that like, do you remember Kohlberg's stages of development?
Nope.
Like,
You're gonna
so
need to
where
educate me.
Okay. So like yeah, it's sort of like different ones like where it's like 0 to 3 and then 5 to 6. And it's like where it's like sense of identity, freedom of exploration, freedom of differentiation, and then moving on into adulthood. And they specifically what I think about with that with my mother, because she had this trauma that has gone on, and like where she's constantly has revisited it with me, even in that letter, I'm trying to think, like, where have I also been traumatized and at what level because that has constantly been revisited. Does that make sense?
Right. It does actually. And I really appreciate your willingness to be open and to reflect with our listeners in terms of this process because it's at this depth that I think that the experience is better understood. This isn't just a matter of how fast does my wheelchair go or can I reach to the top of the fridge. It's what's the nature of how this part of me influences the way that people relate to me, even my own parents.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and like because on some level, or like and let's even expand that out here. Well, like it's not even my parents, it's my brother. It's my whole family system.
Yeah.
So
Hmm.
I think to some degree, right, because my mother held on to this, and because it was even like her final message. It's like I've always within, like, from her perspective, and I don't know to what degree my father's, but I'm always just like one step away from just being that defenseless creature that was born into the world that fought to live, which on some level
Right.
is excellent. Like, you could look at that, like if we were to use the parlance of like narrative therapy as like a hero's journey, but to what degree does, Frodo put down the ring and just become another member of the Shire?
He doesn't, though, right? That's the issue. That's
Hmm.
the issue. Within the context of what you're talking about, the fundamental change puts him in a place where he never does.
Hmm.
And and that can't be the place, right? That can't be the experience of the individual with the disability. They can't be somehow in some way always slightly outside of the circle. Like I think actually your friendship and mine, our friendship says something about that as well. Like, is there an innate known process between us that you have a disability? Of course there is. But and I'm not a hero. I'm not some kind of golden boy or something. It's just you're Trent.
Hmm.
That's who you
Yes.
are. Like to me you're the guy that is, the biggest nerd I've ever met and proud of it and knows comics inside and out and, knows therapeutic processes better than anybody I know. that can, outmatch anyone or talk circles around people when it comes to theory. And all of those are you, but none of exactly define you. And knowing the person, I think when somebody truly sees you, and maybe I
Hmm.
said this before, they don't see a chair anymore.
Thanks, dude. Appreciate that. God, you can make me cry on air. Yeah, no, like that means a lot because I think, and as we go through and we do all of these, like again too, because I mean we're talking about disability pride, but I think what is important, and because we're talking about humanizing mental health, where it's fine to have pride in something, but it's good to have balance so that a person's sense of identity doesn't get assumed by that, because I feel and I mean I may be wrong here, I can't speak for every person with a disability, visible or invisible, but I find that people, it's about a balancing act where are you going to internalize the narrative that people give you, like, in terms of broader society about what your disability is? Are you going to go counterintuitive to that? Are you going to come up with your own narrative? But also, too, is that the only story that you tell yourself? Whereas for me, this is only one part of my museum. This is only one chapter. And one of the greatest things one of the things that I wonder, and I mean, this would never be something that I don't know that I would ever, well, it's a regret that I have. I mean, we all have regrets when people die, but it's about what would it have been like, and how would it have impacted my relationship with my mother to actually help her process that trauma, even in her later years? Or what would it have meant? How would that have impacted my growth over my lifetime if she would have been able to experience that and see me as a multidimensional person, or if I would have perceived that a little bit more? I'm not that she didn't. Does that make
Yeah,
sense?
yeah. Yeah, it is curious. And I think how could you not wonder, especially when you get a message like that after she's passed, and it like solidifies something inside you about her, the way that she knows you. How could you not wonder about if this was processed? How would things be different? The other thing that I wonder about, Trent, is actually because you lived in the environment that you did, how has that brought you to who you are? I mean, and I'm going to pause that for a second because I don't want you to think about it. But so these are things that I know about you. So I know all of those things I said before, but I also know that you went to school and as an incomplete quadriplegic completed an undergraduate degree. I know that you left home and you lived on your own. I know that after this that you went on and you completed a master's degree. I know that you started a private practice. I know all of these things that you have accomplished and have done, and those in and of themselves don't define you either. That's not what I'm saying. But what I'm wondering is how did the environment that you came from also produce the man that sits on the other side of the table in my podcast today?
Yeah, and yeah. Like I've definitely experienced adversity, and I think I I wanna take that and place that outside of the disability, because I don't think it was really my disability that made me a quote unquote fighter. I think that really comes down to a biological function, like that literally is, as Freud would say, the fire for life, aided by medical technology, of course. But I mean, everything else that came from that, really, like, and my perspective, like where you say that I went on, that I did these things, a lot of that came down to my parents and the other people that I had the fortune to be around that, inspired me to do certain things, that pushed me forward, that helped to shape a perspective of resilience. My birth, while bringing me into this world, and giving me the possibility to interact with people in a unique way, like that's just the platform. It was all of the doctors, the nurses, the various aides, the positive people in my family that nurtured that that helped to create that lens of of my disability and of how to deal with adversity that then I actively chose when I had enough time to be able to then go on and do these other things because I have seen other people with similar disabilities than me, or in some cases even like less obvious adversity crumble under that. But it's not because I didn't. There's nothing special about me per se. It was my environment that helped to spur that on inside of me. I've had very very positive people like again like it would even be like people like you that at those times that have seen me that have saw the person beyond the chair, as it were. Does that make
Yeah, yeah.
sense?
Yeah, there's a couple things that really jump out at me in what you just said. Like one of them is that you said I was just fundamentally a fighter. So you talk about that as like, okay, so if these events didn't happen within your birthing process, then you would have been a fighter, whether it happened or not. That's just fundamentally the spark that was inside you. And
Hmm.
then you talk about the environment around you, and you talk about the environment around you as one that was helped to create a particular narrative. But this is where it gets complex, Trent. And that is there's a narrative of post traumatic parenting and a mom that held a wound her whole life. But there's also a mom that would not let you do anything but reach your potential.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm glad that you point that out because I think like when we talk about a post traumatic wound, a person and when we talk about even like post traumatic parenting, right? And they'll mention in the book that at times like just because you've experienced a wound and that you can sometimes parent from a place of a post traumatic wound, that's not only who you are. It's about recognizing when am I operating from trauma and when am I operating from, that sense of whole parentness, when you have the patience, the kindness, the drive, and it's about being able to recognize when you're switching between those two parts.
Yeah, that totally makes sense. And I have no idea. This is not mine to say in terms of right or wrong. It's just then all of a sudden, to me, her message kind of starts to make sense. The
Okay.
last message. And this is the sense that it makes to me. That is, I think she felt guilty about it her whole life, even though it wasn't her fault.
Mhm.
I really do. Like, that's my best guess in terms of how you describe this. Your mom did everything to give you the best life, and her last message is still caught up in the birth. And wow, that I don't even know on a conscious level, or if that's even a conscious awareness thing. But your mom was a nurse. You took care of so many people, and then feel somehow like she failed you. Like, yeah.
Yeah,
Maybe the
and
last message was actually intended to launch you off into, but almost a message that's saying, "Hey, son, I'm sorry that I didn't do what I needed to. My biology didn't carry the way it was supposed to."
maybe, and I think that's a really good point that I think a lot of parents hold on to a lot of really toxic guilt.
Hmm.
And I think that,
Self-blame.
yeah, yeah, blame and guilt. And, because I mean, like again, going back through just to highlight the story there a little bit because she like again I've heard the story of my birth and everything leading up to it before that. Granted, this is from my mother's point of view, that she knew something was wrong in the pregnancy, and she had actually spoken to the doctor beforehand, and he had said that don't worry about it, this is just your second pregnancy, nothing's wrong. And it was like I think a week or two later that she went into like unintentional labor.
Early labor, yeah.
Yeah, yeah. So I think, yeah, that very well may be right. I don't know, but
For
if
sure,
they,
for sure.
yeah, and like it's just about, I think, yeah, and that's the one thing. Like I have a passion for working with people with disabilities specifically. Actually, I really like working with parents for that reason because I think that so many of them can carry the scars of, that when their child develops is that, that they did something wrong. And,
Hmm. Hmm.
and sometimes it's about how can we process those scars and even say that, while, the person may not be able to live a quote unquote normal life, how has that actually, you know, or what can you do with that? And how can you honor that pain, but not let it be an anchor around your neck and
Hmm.
around the neck of your child, or like to define your relationship?
Yeah, totally. Absolutely. And that's so well said. These things are really complicated, and I think without any actual justification, parents often believe it's their fault that their child has a disability. And
Mm-hmm.
yeah. So let's bring this back to the position they were talking about in terms of Pride Month, because this is a very interesting thing. I think that someone cannot, I don't think it's possible for someone to be proud of
Mm-hmm.
something that they haven't accepted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, and you know what? I love that you brought that up because I think that like when we have all of these awareness months and or awareness days, because I mean there's Disability Pride Month, and then I also have participated in International Day for Persons with Disabilities. But there's this expectation that you're supposed to be proud and that you're supposed to wear that as like a badge of honor. But for so many people, especially with disability, because a lot of times, everybody will eventually join like disability. It's one of the biggest groups out there that people eventually join. But I mean, it's about can you accept that and what does that mean? For a lot of people that I've met that have an acquired disability, that grief can take a long time. Or even for people that acquire it via birth, sometimes if their family doesn't accept them for who they are, or whatever it may be, or where there may be a struggle or a narrative that's given to them, they don't have pride in their disability. They look at it as a disability. They look at it as a hinderment. So that's a rough road to get to, that you don't just wake up one day and go, I'm happy that I have this thing that makes me, different from everybody else, or that makes
Mhm.
my life more challenging. And, I think when we look at these various Pride months, I think we also, or Pride events, whether it be for disabilities or others, we need to honor that journey of what that means, because there can't just be an expectation that you're good with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's so important. Like the the big picture is about self-acceptance and
Hmm.
about that I belong. Like those are the fundamental things. When we're talking about someone being proud of who they are, regardless of who they are, it's about self-love.
Mm, mm, hmm. Self-love, self-compassion, you know, all of these things are intertwined. And, I think, yeah, like self-love, I think we so free, like I've known so many people over my life, personally and professionally, and I'm sure you do too, that give love freely to themselves or freely to other people, but not to themselves because
Yes, yes.
they don't feel worthy, you
Yeah,
know?
yeah, totally. In fact, Trent, there's something I think that's very important that I want to articulate, and that is one of the things that I know of you, and I've said this many times actually in a church setting
Mm,
when we talk about these stories and we talk about your journey. So your journey going through undergraduate, graduate studies, doing those different things, creating a podcast that's listened to across the world. Those things you didn't need to do those things. It
mm,
wasn't like I'm not good enough, and so I got to do all of these things to get to become good enough. And I think that's really important to point out that that other people with disability, they don't need to somehow do something to become good enough. You're
yeah.
already good enough.
Yeah, and and I really want to highlight that because I love that because in a lot of ways, what you're speaking about right there. Have you ever heard of the term inspiration porn?
That sounds like a very provocative term that hits hard, and I like it.
Yeah, so inspiration porn, right, is the idea that people with disabilities, like, were looked at by other people, and like it's almost kind of like, like people look at us and we're inspired, like we inspire them, or it's sort of like framing it as this, like, monumental journey that you've overcome the odds. Where for a lot of people with disabilities, myself included, well, I honor my journey. And I don't mind inspiring people. I do not want people like either A, putting themselves down or B, getting off. Like, like where it's like, oh, wow, what an inspirational story. And like almost like, enjoying it as content where like where they're getting joy from watching that.
Sure, sure. Yeah. Because for me, you had life goals just like
Hmm.
anybody else. And you just went after your life goals to do what you wanted to do.
Yeah, yeah, and like I'm gonna be frank, and I mean I need to honor this is that my life goals are challenging, and it took me a long time to be able to accept like the fact that it was more challenging because I would just say I'm like everybody else, but I'm not. But it's about finding that midpoint because I think for so much of it, like for a lot of us that when we're made as inspiration porn, right? Like when we're looked at as something for that type of consumption, there's a lot of us, myself included, that almost go the exact opposite perspective where we want to fade into the background. We accept, like I've accepted my disability, but it's taken me a long time to go, yeah, but it was bloody hard being able to do this because
Uh-huh.
every time I would do that, people would come up there and almost like fake cheer me on or like, oh, wow, I want to hear more about it.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. It is a tricky balance, isn't it?
Yeah.
Because you had things through the academic process that just would have made it harder to deal with.
Mhm.
It was the playing field is not even.
No, no, and yeah, and, I don't think a playing field. It doesn't matter who you are, will ever be even. And because because I think that that's just part of life. But it's about can we acknowledge that without and assist people without going overboard one way or the other. Does that make sense?
Yeah, totally. It totally does.
I'm curious what's going through your mind right now, dude.
Well, this has just been one of the most impactful conversations we've had in a really long time. And just the depth of the conversation. I really hope that individuals out there can get some perspective and that there's some things said today shared from your lived experience, your particular lived experience in combination with your knowledge is a unique combination. And I hope it's enlightening for lots of other people out there.
Yeah, me too. And like we said that this is Disability Pride Month, and I think that it it needs to be celebrated, and recognized. But at the same time, too, I think that, and like you said, deeper conversations, more nuanced conversations need to be held because we can do the important structural work, we can do the acceptance work, but I think it's about having these more nuanced things like where we talk about, like where we just talked about like grief and loss, or we talked about inspiration porn that I think sometimes, and self acceptance that really gets glossed over or maybe not
And I
even
think,
started.
and I really appreciate you talking about the context of a lifelong relationship with your mom and how there was a flow of how that so word that I'm looking for changed isn't the right word how it influenced that relationship.
Yeah, and and I mean like that definitely what I even though my mother and I had a very dynamic relationship, we did, but that was an undercurrent of it, or sort of a background beat, if you were a backbeat. But like without that too, and I want to kind of like say this on a positive note, that without having my disability, and having the relationship that I did, because just about amount of time, I don't know if I would have had as strong a relationship with my mother.
Maybe not, right? Yeah.
Maybe not. I mean, one can never know.
Yeah. And because it just simply is your story. So if it was otherwise, then you would be different.
Exactly. Yeah, like that's the thing. And I mean, again, I'll bring it back to that book on trauma, on post-traumatic trauma, is that sometimes, right, we can allow like our trauma to define us and to keep us trapped in the moment, or we can allow our trauma, and our experiences to help shape our understanding. Like where, like if you've had, they'll talk about it in the book, like if you've experienced trauma at a certain age, that part of you will be keenly aware of like what a 6-year-old would need. So it's about how can you use that to your benefit to some degree. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. It does. Absolutely.
Yeah,
Trent, this has been a powerful conversation.
it definitely has. Yeah. I think, yeah, I'm curious, like, do you have any, maybe we already did this, but do you have any big takeaways from today, dude?
Yeah, further reflection. Like actually the biggest thing that is a takeaway from me is the lifelong relationship and and how disability was part of the story.
Definitely, yeah, you can't undercut that. For me, one of my big takeaways from this is I don't know if I would have had this conversation with anybody else but you, because I
Yeah.
mean, like we formed a friendship over the years, and I mean, well, I may talk about this with people, but I wouldn't have died, and speaking of relationship, I wouldn't have done this in a public forum with anybody else but you, because I don't trust anybody else but you to be able to walk through this.
Yeah, I feed that right back to you, Trent. There's actually been a number of times that I felt like I want to put a message into the world. It's actually super personal, and the only one I would trust to do that with is you. I've sat there back and forth on, do I want to do it? Do I not want to do it? Maybe that'll be something that we explore in a future episode. So there is nothing quite like the bond of trust between
Hmm.
friends who become brothers.
Hmm. Absolutely, dude. Absolutely, dude. And yeah, I think that's a perfect place to end off, like where, yeah. And on that note, I'm Trent Akers.
And I'm Jeremy Alcorn.
See you next time.
Thank you for joining us today. We hope that this message has been as meaningful to you as it has been to us. If you're looking for help, you can find us on Facebook at Humanizing Mental Health.